At 5:47 p.m. on October 27th, 2025, Hurricane Melissa slammed into Jamaica with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and gusts well over 190, making it the strongest hurricane ever recorded to make landfall on the island and one of the top 5 Atlantic storms in modern history. For a full 12 hours, the country was hammered by forces that bent steel, erased coastlines, and pushed the Caribbean Sea 4 meters inland. Whole neighborhoods were flattened before nightfall. By dawn, the island's shape itself had changed. Rivers rerouted, beaches swallowed, farmland turned to saltwater lagoons. Scientists would later call it a once-in-a-millennium impact. Jamaicans called it the night the wind screamed. Meteorological records confirm the scale. A minimum central pressure near 910 millibars, a radius of hurricane-force winds spanning nearly the width of the island, and rainfall totals exceeding 800 millimeters in some mountain valleys. Nothing in living memory, not Gilbert in 1988, not Dean in 2007, compared. Satellite imagery captured an almost perfect spiral of white fury closing over Jamaica's southern coast. From space, it looked beautiful. On the ground, it was apocalyptic. The sound was like a freight train that never stopped, recalled Desmond Clark, a firefighter in Clarendon Parish. We thought the whole island would lift off the ocean. How did it get this strong, this fast? Just 7 days earlier, Melissa had been a mild tropical storm drifting harmlessly across the Atlantic. Then sea surface temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and unusually low wind shear created the ideal incubator. Within 48 hours, it exploded from Category 1 to Category 5, one of the fastest intensifications ever observed in the Caribbean basin. Forecasters issued warnings, but even seasoned experts underestimated what was coming. "We knew it would be bad," said Dr. Marlene Grant, lead meteorologist at Jamaica's Weather Service. "We didn't know it would be historic." As Melissa's eye tightened and pressure plummeted, global tracking centers realized they were witnessing a meteorological singularity, a storm so perfectly organized that every model failed to predict its strength. By the evening of October 27th, there was no time left for models, only survival. The next chapter would not be about forecasting, it would be about endurance. By the morning of October 26th, 2025, the message was clear: Jamaica stood directly in the path of a monster. The National Hurricane Center had confirmed it. Melissa was now a Category 5 hurricane, with a perfectly defined eye and a trajectory aimed straight at the island's southwest coast. Still, in the capital city of Kingston, the streets were busy. Children played in courtyards, shopkeepers boarded up windows, while radio stations played gospel music. The tension was visible but restrained. Jamaicans have faced storms before, but not like this. "We were used to Category 3, even 4, said Inspector Rohan Daly of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. But when they said 5, that's when we knew we were in uncharted territory. At 8 a.m., Prime Minister Andrew Holness addressed the nation from the Office of Disaster Preparedness. His tone was urgent yet calm. "We are facing an unprecedented threat. I urge everyone in coastal areas, do not wait. Move inland. Tonight will be unlike any we've ever experienced." Across the island, sirens wailed. Shelters opened in schools, churches, and community centers. Over 800 locations were designated as safe zones, but the reality on the ground was far more chaotic. Many residents in rural parishes couldn't reach them. Roads in Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth were already flooding from outer rain bands. Public transport had stopped running. Gas stations were dry. In Montego Bay, Red Cross coordinator Denise McLeod led one of the last evacuation buses out of the coastal zone. "We had to turn people away," she said later. "Not because we wanted to, but because we ran out of seats." Meteorologists watched helplessly as Melissa grew stronger by the hour. Wind speeds climbed past 180 miles per hour, pressure continued to fall, and satellite imagery showed a storm that seemed to be feeding on the Caribbean itself. By midday, the entire island was under a hurricane warning. Flights were grounded. Emergency crews huddled in command centers waiting for the first impact reports. The storm's outer bands were already scraping the coast, bending palms, and tearing off zinc rooftops like foil. "We kept thinking maybe it would turn," said Dr. Grant, the chief meteorologist. But every new model said the same thing. Jamaica was the target. As evening approached, radar operators at the Meteorological Service went silent. One after another, communication towers fell. The final radar image, captured at 5:40 p.m., just minutes before landfall, showed the storm's eye locking directly onto New Hope, a small town on the southwestern coast. And then, the screens went black. Outside, the wind began to scream. The next 12 hours would redefine the island's history, not through words, but through silence, darkness, and the sound of everything breaking at once. At 5:47 p.m. on October 27th, 2025, the eye of Hurricane Melissa crossed Jamaica's southwest coast near the small fishing town of New Hope. In that moment, the island met the full force of nature's fury. Melissa's sustained winds, 185 miles per hour, tore through homes, schools, and hospitals with the precision of a blade. Windows shattered inward. Entire roofs lifted into the air like leaves. Then came the sound, a deep, endless roar that survivors compared to a freight train that never stopped. Within minutes, power grids collapsed across multiple parishes. Communications failed. The sea rose inland in a single, unstoppable wall. In Savannah, Lamar, residents watched their streets turn into rivers as storm surge climbed to nearly 4 meters. Cars floated, street lights disappeared, and the night sky glowed an eerie blue from sparking transformers. Further inland, the storm didn't weaken. It climbed Jamaica's mountain spine and unleashed torrents of rain, up to 800 millimeters in some valleys, triggering landslides that buried entire villages. The wind stripped hillsides bare. Rivers overflowed. Bridges folded like tin. In Kingston, the capital, the sound of emergency sirens was soon replaced by silence. "You couldn't tell where the ocean ended and the city began," recalled Inspector Daly. "Everything was moving, water, debris, even buildings." For 12 hours, Jamaica endured the strongest hurricane in its recorded history. When the eye finally passed, dawn revealed a country changed beyond recognition. Roads erased, coastlines redrawn, and hundreds missing. Meteorologists called it the perfect storm. For Jamaicans, it was something else entirely. The longest night the island had ever known. When the winds finally calmed on the morning of October 28th, 2025, the silence was unbearable. The sound of Melissa had been constant, a deafening roar of air and water. And now that it was gone, Jamaica felt hollow, stunned, and unfamiliar. Dawn revealed the scale of the disaster. Entire neighborhoods lay flattened. Palm trees snapped in half. Power lines dangled into flooded streets. And roads that once led to bustling communities now ended in lakes of brown water. The National Works Agency declared more than 80% of the country's roads impassable. In the town of Mandeville, families dug through the debris of what had been their homes. "We didn't recognize our own street," said Patrice Ellis, a mother of 2. "It looked like another planet." Across the island, people wandered in silence, clutching photographs, searching for loved ones. The first damage assessments came slowly. Emergency teams from Kingston and Montego Bay had to navigate washed-out bridges and landslides to reach isolated parishes. Helicopters from the Jamaica Defense Force dropped food and water to communities cut off by floodwaters. Hospitals overflowed with the injured. The government confirmed hundreds dead and thousands displaced, though officials warned the true toll could be far higher. Nearly 90% of the island was without electricity. The national water supply was contaminated, and fuel reserves were running low. Still, amid the destruction, resilience began to surface. Neighbors formed human chains to clear roads. Churches opened their doors as makeshift clinics. Volunteer radio operators restored contact between families. "The storm broke everything we built," one local pastor said, standing in the rubble of his chapel. "But it didn't break who we are." For the rest of the world, Hurricane Melissa was history's strongest storm to strike Jamaica. For Jamaicans, October 28th, was the first day of survival. In the days that followed, the world watched as Jamaica fought to rise from the wreckage. News networks broadcast images of flattened homes, overturned buses, and survivors waving from rooftops. The devastation was so extensive that aerial drones struggled to map the damage. There were no familiar landmarks left to orient them. By October 29th, international assistance was on the move. The United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom dispatched naval vessels and cargo planes loaded with generators, water purifiers, and medical supplies. The United Nations declared a humanitarian emergency, and regional partners from the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency coordinated rescue flights from Barbados and Trinidad. In Kingston, the Jamaica Defense Force set up field hospitals and distributed ration packs. Volunteer groups like the Red Cross and Food for the Poor mobilized thousands of local responders. Despite the chaos, orders slowly began to return. Traffic cleared, curfews were lifted, and communication networks flickered back to life. World leaders issued statements of solidarity. U.S. President Kamala Harris, whose family has Jamaican roots, pledged immediate disaster relief and long-term reconstruction funding. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer called Melissa a humanitarian crisis demanding a global response. Donations poured in from every corner of the diaspora, from London to Toronto to New York. But logistics remained a nightmare. Many ports were too damaged for large ships to dock. Rural communities in St. Elizabeth and Clarendon went nearly a week without aid due to washed-out roads. Relief teams had to rely on helicopters and fishing boats to reach survivors. Still, hope began to flicker through the ruins. In Spanish Town, children played again, chasing rainwater down cracked sidewalks. A Jamaican flag, torn and faded, flew above a shelter in Kingston. The storm had ended, but the rebuilding had only begun. And as global aid continued to arrive, one phrase echoed through every broadcast, every headline, every prayer. Jamaica will rise again. Weeks after Hurricane Melissa, the air over Jamaica carried two sounds: the hum of generators and the steady rhythm of rebuilding. What had been silence and despair in the first days after the storm slowly turned into motion. Trucks hauling debris, workers patching power lines, and families sweeping what remained of their homes. By mid-November, electricity was restored to 60% of the island, and schools began reopening in Kingston and Montego Bay. Across the countryside, tents gave way to timber frames and sheet metal roofs. The recovery was uneven but determined, a reflection of the Jamaican spirit itself. Government economists estimated damages above $12 billion, making Melissa the costliest natural disaster in Jamaica's history. The agricultural sector was devastated. Coffee plantations in the Blue Mountains, banana fields in St. Mary, and sugar estates across Clarendon lay in ruin. Yet farmers replanted almost immediately. "If we wait for perfect soil, we'll never see another harvest," said Carlton Morgan, a smallholder near Mandeville. "The land is wounded, not dead." International funding flowed in through the World Bank, IMF, and Caribbean Development Fund, focused on climate-resilient infrastructure, buried power lines, hurricane-proof roofs, and early warning systems with satellite redundancy. Engineers began designing flood-resistant roads and elevated evacuation shelters. At the same time, climate scientists met in Geneva and Kingston to study what made Melissa so ferocious. Preliminary findings pointed to record-high ocean temperatures, a full degree Celsius above average, and an atmosphere saturated with moisture. The conclusion was stark. Warmer seas mean stronger storms, and small island nations like Jamaica are on the front line. In the capital's Parliament building, Prime Minister Andrew Holness addressed the nation once more. "Melissa has tested us, but she will not define us. Our future will be built on preparation, not fear." Today, new homes rise where old ones fell. Children walk to reopen schools. Farmers return to their fields. The scars remain, in memory, in landscape, in the lines of a map forever changed.